When people talk about classic kart races, the same names usually come up over and over again. Mario Kart, Crash Team Racing, Diddy Kong Racing, maybe even Sonic and All-Stars if we're stretching a bit further into the future. But buried underneath those heavy hitters is an entire graveyard of smaller licensed kart races. Games that certainly did not reinvent the wheel, and did not dominate sales charts, but still managed to carve out a weird little space in the memories of kids who grew up renting whatever looked fun at their local Blockbuster. And one of those games, a game that feels almost designed to be forgotten to time, is Nicktoons Racing on the original PlayStation. So welcome to the Worst Racing Games, the internet series where you guys suggest different racing games that you think are terrible, then I play them, review them, and rank them. So last week we had another original PlayStation title with Vanishing Point, which was a surprisingly good time. So this week the wheel has blessed us with Nicktoons Racing. This is a game that absolutely screams budget title, but there were somehow still parts that impressed me. It's short, it's simple, and it's definitely rough around the edges, but it understands exactly what it is, and more importantly, who it's for. So today let's take a look at Nicktoons Racing, how it plays, how it looks, how it sounds, what it did right and what it did wrong. So without further ado, let's jump into the world of Nicktoons Racing. So the game doesn't waste much time trying to tell an elaborate story, and honestly it really doesn't need to. The game opens with a short, fairly low frame rate animated cutscene that looks like it's barely holding itself together at maybe 15 FPS. In it, various Nickelodeon characters receive mysterious letters inviting them to compete in a Grand Prix race for something called the Krusty Krab Big Bun Award. Why is the Krusty Krab hosting a multiversal kart racing tournament involving babies, monsters, beavers, and feral jungle children? Well, don't worry about it. This is pure cartoon logic, and the game fully commits to that energy. There's no villain trying to take over the world, no stakes beyond bragging rights and a big novelty trophy. It's just an excuse to throw a bunch of Nickelodeon characters into go-karts and let them loose. And honestly, that's exactly the kind of thing you want from a game like this. So Nicktoons Racing was developed by Software Creations, at least the PC and PlayStation port was, and was published by Infogrames. It released on Windows PCs and Game Boy Color in 2000, PlayStation in September of 2001, and then the Game Boy Advance at some point in 2002. So for an early 2000s game with 90s Nickelodeon crossovers, the character roster is actually pretty respectable. Your playable cast includes Tommy and Angelica Pickles from Rugrats, Spongebob and Patrick, CatDog, Ickis, Stimpy, and a mysterious unlockable racer who sounds suspiciously like Plankton. And there are more as well. It's a solid lineup representing a good chunk of Nickelodeon's golden era. Almost every major late 90s Nicktoon is accounted for, except there's nothing from Rocko's Modern Life, and Rocko feels like a perfect candidate for a kart racer. But, oh well, most likely this came down to time, budget, or licensing constraints. Nicktoons Racing was very clearly made quickly and cheaply, and cuts had to be made somewhere. That said, what is here works pretty well. Each character feels distinct, recognizable, and true to their show. Something that becomes even more important once you see their karts. So Nicktoons Racing is not a long game, not even remotely. At its core, the main mode consists of just 3 cups, each containing 4 tracks, so for anyone good at maths, that makes for a total of 12 tracks. You pick your character, select a difficulty once you beat it on easy mode, and race through each cup. If you're even halfway competent at kart races, you can pretty much finish the entire game in about 2 hours. But somehow that doesn't feel too much like a flaw. This is a game that understands its own limitations. It doesn't pad itself out with artificial grinding or endless unlocks. It gives you a tight, focused experience and then promptly gets out of the way. Beyond the cups, there are some additional modes that you can play, such as time trials, there's single races if you don't want to do the cups, a multiplayer mode, and then relay races where you choose 3 characters and swap between each one from lap to lap. So while it's short, there's enough here to justify replaying it, especially if you're playing with friends or revisiting it purely for nostalgia. In the era that this came out, the era of game rentals, this would have been perfect. You rent it on a Friday night, beat it over the weekend, mess around in multiplayer, and then send it promptly back on Monday, completely satisfied. Now before we go any further, if you're a fan of kart racers or just retro racing games in general, then why not hit that subscribe button and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with the worst racing games series. And whilst you're at it, if you want to support the channel any further, then why not check out my Patreon using the link in the description below. Over on my Patreon, you can get access to cool goodies like early access to videos and your name in the credits of every single upload. It would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, let's get back to some Toons Racing. So if you've ever played a kart racer before, Nicktoons Racing will feel pretty familiar. You press X to accelerate, you press square to brake, you have a boost with R1, you can use your items with L1, and R2 hops and initiates a drift. It doesn't try to reinvent anything, there's no complicated mechanics, no experimental systems. It just borrows heavily from Mario Kart and Crash Team Racing, and that's perfectly okay. The drifting, however, is where things start to feel a little rough. Compared to Crash Team Racing or Mario Kart 64, drifting in Nicktoons Racing is noticeably stiffer and much less satisfying. It works, but it never quite feels good. On tighter tracks or more complex layouts, this can lead to awkward cornering, and some very definite frustration when you collide into walls and the car just piles into it. That said, the game is still playable, the controls are responsive, the physics are mostly consistent, and once you get used to the handling, it's easy enough to manage. It's not the smoothest kart racer out there, but it's far from the worst. One area where Nicktoons Racing really shines though is its item design. Every power-up is themed around a specific show or character, and a surprising amount of effort went into making them feel unique and appropriate. Some examples include trash cans from Our Real Monsters, Stimpy's kitty litter, Spongebob's bubbles, and a homing jellyfish. There's a camera flash, sticky goo, which is very Nickelodeon, and a massive stump which drops on every other racer, and that's from the Angry Beavers. These items don't just function differently, they look and feel like they belong in the Nickelodeon universe. It's clear the developers cared about representing each show properly, even if the rest of the game had to be made on a tight budget. This attention to detail is one of the reasons why the game still kinda holds up today. Thanks to the magic of cartoon logic, none of these characters need to worry about drowning, physics, or even basic safety regulations. Every racer has a completely unique kart design that reflects their personality or show. Tommy rides in the reptile wagon, Spongebob drives a pineapple, Ickis rides a cockroach. And then there's CatDog, wearing an old-timey driving cap, goggles, and scarf, which is a visual that alone justifies their inclusion. These designs are fun, expressive, and immediately recognisable. They add a ton of personality to the game and make every race feel visually distinct. Every major Nicktoon represented in the roster gets at least one track, including Rugrats, Hey Arnold, Angry Beavers, CatDog, Spongebob, so on. Each track is visually distinct enough that you can instantly tell which show it's based on, even without reading the name, which is pretty impressive. The layouts themselves, for the most part, are generally simple, with a few branching paths and hidden shortcuts sprinkled in. Some later tracks get a bit cluttered with tight turns and environmental hazards that can feel overwhelming at times. But none of the tracks overstay their welcome. Races typically last 3 to 4 minutes at most, keeping things fast and engaging enough. Visually, these tracks are pure nostalgia fuel. They capture the look and vibe of their respective shows remarkably well, considering the hardware limitations. And if we're gonna be real, the Spongebob track in this game honestly is better than the one they made for Sonic Racing Cross Worlds, so make of that what you will. The soundtrack doesn't use direct themes from the cartoons, but instead creates original music inspired by each show's style. Playful strings for Rugrats, and steel guitars and ukuleles for Spongebob. So on and so forth. It works surprisingly well. The music is cheerful, energetic, and unmistakably cartoony. However, the sound mixing isn't great. Some item sound effects are absurdly loud, character voice lines can also spike in volume, but also some can be lost behind other sounds. It's very weird. There are certain shrieks and whinings that are really irritating, but then half the time you can't even hear Patrick shout that he's sad. Still, all the original voice actors return to voice their characters, which adds a massive amount of authenticity, even if they only say like one thing. It's honestly kind of embarrassing that many modern Nickelodeon racing games couldn't be bothered to do the same. Now that said, there are some incredibly irritating sounds on the main menu, and I guess it's just designed to have that 90s Nickelodeon cartoony feel, but by god it's so annoying. Now, in terms of critical response, there aren't that many reviews of the original PlayStation version out there. However, on the now defunct game rankings, the game held a 70% out of 100. And according to VG Charts, the game would go on to sell over 150,000 units for the original PlayStation, which isn't really that bad considering this was made on such a shoestring budget. At least, presumably it was. Another thing that I find particularly interesting is seeing how much the games we look at are worth today in today's current market. So according to price charting, if you want to get a complete copy of Nicktoons Racing for the PlayStation, you're going to be spending about £20, which is actually more than I was expecting to see. If you want it brand new, then that's 50 quid. So now the time has come to rank Nicktoons Racing on our worst racing games tier list. And honestly, I had a pretty good time with this game. I didn't grow up on this era of cartoons, outside of Spongebob in the 2000s, so it didn't have as much nostalgia for me, but the actual gameplay is fairly tight, the maps are nicely designed, and there's something weirdly nostalgic about it even if I didn't play it when I was younger. So for me, this game's actually gonna join last week's entry into actually not that bad alongside Vanishing Point. This is a pretty solid game. It's not perfect, sometimes the physics are a bit wonky, sometimes you crash into walls, but that's all part of kart racing. It's still a lot of fun. Nicktoons Racing is not a masterpiece. It's short, it's kinda rough, but it succeeds where so many licensed games do kind of fail. It's fun, it respects the source material, it understands its audience, and it doesn't overcomplicate itself. It just gives you a few hours of colourful nostalgic entertainment, and then politely steps aside. It's not the best kart racer you'll ever play, but it's far from the worst, and sometimes that's more than enough. And so that takes us to the end of our look at Nicktoons Racing, and with it this week's episode of Worst Racing Games. What do you guys think of Nicktoons Racing? Have you played it? Would you rank it any differently? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, if you have a suggestion you want to see, then let me know as well. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe and tap the bell for notifications to stay up to date with my future uploads. A massive shout out to my Patreon subscribers for the continued support, and all I really have left to say is thanks and goodbye.